Good afternoon, everyone. It's my pleasure to welcome everyone joining us here today in person and online to learn more about protecting yourself against online schemes and scams. And if you fall victim to such a scam, what you need to do after such an attack. This is a joint seminar presentation between Gowlings and Scotia McLeod. My name is Rose DeMello Johnson. I'm a partner at Gowling WLG, and I'm one of the co-moderators of today's discussion. A little bit about me and why I wanted to be here today. I help my clients with developing and implementing estate plans that achieve their personal and business objectives. In doing so, my clients are providing me with lots of information about themselves, their family, and their businesses. And it's all very valuable information. So I wanted to be able to educate my clients about what to do to prevent an attack on such information. And if they do fall victim to such disclosure, what to do to stop the damage to their finances, to their reputation, and let's be real, to their mental health, because I don't know if any of you have experienced the disclosure of personal information, but it can be devastating. My co-moderator is Jonathan Rigby, and I'll let Jonathan just say a few words about himself and Scotia.
Perfect. Thank you, Rose. Yeah, and thanks very much to Gowlings for hosting the event. They've got a beautiful spot here, and we were out on the patio earlier, enjoying the spring weather we've got and the views and everything. So it's a super spot for it. And yeah, I'm Jonathan Rigby, and portfolio manager with Scotia McLeod. We're the umbrella brand of Scotia Wealth Management. I've been 29 years with the firm, and I've got with me here a group from our team. There's 10 of us on our immediate team, plus all of our specialists that we bring in. And what our team does is that we really believe in planning is kind of the cornerstone of everything that we do. So we feel that we want to anticipate and plan for our clients' life stages. And what that entails is different things for everybody. Everyone's a unique situation, but the one thing that everybody does have in common is worry. And what those worries are can be all different things, again, at different points of their lives. And one thing that comes up quite often is getting hacked. And we've seen this with multiple clients over the years, different situations like like a relationship, fraudulent relationship, and somebody getting taken for substantial amounts of money that they were sending off to someone. Banking information attempts to get switched over to get money sent elsewhere. We've got to be on point, and getting us having the ability to really deeply know our clients is so hugely beneficial to helping protect you, because then we know when they're calling in and it seems a little bit odd, we're like, okay, this kind of is a trigger point. So that's certainly part of some of the processes maybe that are important, that our specialists are going to talk to us about here today. So thanks again, and I think we'll pass it along back to Rose.
So just before we get started, a couple of housekeeping matters. For those of you who are here in person, please feel free. The washrooms are just outside the boardroom. The session is to be more of a discussion format, so please feel free to raise your hand during the presentation or submit a question online via the chat function, and we'll read those out. There will be, if you want to save your questions till the end, there will be a few moments at the end of the presentation if you'd like to wait until then. So now on to today's presentation. We are pleased to have with us here today Brent Arnold and Jasmine Samra. I just combined the two of you. Did you notice that? All right.
Better deal.
It's a package deal. There you go. It's my privilege to introduce Brent. Brent is a partner practicing as a commercial litigator out of our Toronto office. He has a specialization in cybersecurity and leads the firm's commercial litigation technology subgroup. And when Brent is not appearing in all levels of courts dealing with contractual, shareholder, software, and e-commerce disputes, to name but a few, and when he's not co-authoring texts and publications on cybersecurity or data protection, or when he's not chairing various committees focused on cybersecurity and data privacy, he's probably just trying to grab a nap. But instead, he is assisting clients with cyber risk analysis and cyber breach coaching. We are very fortunate to have someone with Brent's expertise within the firm and happy to have him share his knowledge with you today. And Jonathan, you're going to introduce. Thank you.
Perfect. I've got my notes for Jasmine here because she's got an extensive background, and Jasmine Samra is a counsel in Gowling's Toronto office. She's a certified information privacy professional by the International Association of Privacy Professionals. I'll try not to say that 5 times fast, or I'll be in bed. Jasmine advises companies on privacy compliance and data protection issues and helps organizations develop privacy compliance programs and social media policies. And Jasmine's has extensive experience in requests under the Canada's Access to Information Act and Provincial Freedom of Information legislation, and assists clients in protecting third-party business info under those laws. And I've also requested that Jasmine helps figure out how these companies stop getting my cell phone numbers when I have no idea how this works, or duck cleaning business, and which I keep ordering over and over again. Thanks so much.
Thank you so much. So we're going to start our presentation by just giving you guys an overview about privacy laws in Canada and what you can kind of do to protect yourself. And then I will be passing it over to Brent to talk about all the fun online scams and schemes. So we have lots of legislation to protect us. The right to privacy really stems from the Canadian Charter of Rights and Freedoms. We also have federal privacy legislation, PIPEDA, the Personal Information Protection and Electronic Document Act. So that applies federally except for 3 provinces which have substantially similar legislation, which is British Columbia, Alberta, and Quebec. But today we're going to be focusing on Ontario, so that would be under PIPEDA. This is just my favorite slide because it took a very long time to put together, so I like to use it as much as possible. Next slide, please. Okay, so what is personal information? Personal information is information that is identifiable to an individual. And what does that mean? So if there's a serious possibility that an individual could be identified alone from that piece of personal information or in combination, that would be considered personal information. So it's things like your fingerprint, your name, your photo, but it's also specific to data in your life. So that would include IP address, anything you post online, your browser search history. So it's quite broad when you really think about it. Next slide, please. And so what I want you guys to think about when you are doing things online, because our lives are all online now. We've got phones that are basically supercomputers in our pockets where you can buy things, you can post stuff on social media. When you're dealing with these companies, just think about what personal information you're providing, because there is a lot of information out there about you, but there's a study where someone took date of birth, postal code, and gender, and they could identify 87% of Americans with those 3 pieces of information, which is quite shocking. Also, just when you give your postal code, the full postal code, the minimum amount of individual households is limited to 19. So that's only 19 other households that have the same potentially could have the same postal code as you. The first 3 digits of your postal code could be less than 10 households. So when you're just giving your postal code, when they ask you at the LCBO, you don't really need to. So maybe think about not providing that information because it could eventually be linked back to you. So next slide, please. So I just wanted to start with giving you an overview of obligations that companies have to you. So all companies need your consent to process your personal information, and they have to provide you with the purpose of that collection, use, and disclosure. So that's number 1. Number 2 is accountability. They all have to be accountable. They have to have a privacy officer. They have to have their policies and procedures available to customers. They have to identify the purpose for which they're collecting the personal information at the time of collection or before. They have to limit their collection. So they can only collect what is really necessary for the service or the product. They have to limit the use, disclosure, and retention to a period that is necessary for the purpose it was collected for. They have to keep your information accurate. They have to have appropriate safeguards to keep your information protected, and those safeguards depend on the sensitivity of the personal information. And they have to be open about their policies and procedures. They must have them in a form that's easy to understand. Individuals have access rights, so you have the right to access your personal information as well as correct it. And then there has to be a way to provide recourse. So there has to be a complaint procedure available to individuals. And so those are kind of the 10 fundamental things that companies have to have in place when they're dealing with your personal information. Next slide, please. Thank you. So what are your rights? So as I mentioned, you have the right to ask a company to access the personal information you have, the right to correct that information, and usually companies should provide that information for free or for a nominal fee, and they have 30 days to provide you with that information. You also have the right to withdraw your consent to further processing of your personal information. You are required, companies, you need your request before they post anything about you, but the problem I think is you may have consented without even knowing it. So be careful, read the fine print, see what you're agreeing to when you're using various social media or when you're on various websites. And we don't have the right to be forgotten yet. That's only available in the EU and Quebec, but we're having privacy reform federally. So let's see what happens. Right now, you have the right to have your information deleted. Great. Okay, so I'm going to switch gears and just talk about things you can do to protect yourself online. So I think it's really important to learn what personal information is being collected and what privacy controls are available. You don't have to provide personal information to a company unless it's required for the service or the purchase of a product. So anything extra you can say no to. You should also look at the default settings. So does this app really need access to your microphone, calendar, geolocation? Turn those things off. A company recently got in trouble for, a coffee company recently got in trouble for having geolocation on at all times. So consider whether the app really needs access to those things. Keep your settings consistent across all different devices. That way it ensures privacy. There's not one device that's allowing a leakage of information. And then you have to check your settings quite often. Just make sure, because apps change, right? Facebook is very different from what it was 10 years ago. So keep on top of what privacy settings are. Okay, so I'm going to talk about passwords, which I'm sure everyone knows, but I think one of the key things is not to repeat and reuse your password. You have to try and think of passwords that are longer, more complicated, that use symbols and numbers. You can also have a phrase like in this room, you can pick 4 items and create a password like chair, table, glass, computer. This is really important because we have a lot of hackers doing something called credential stuffing, which is basically where they receive username and password from other breaches and then try and use them in other sites. So recently we had a company that had 100,000 of its loyalty members accounts breached because of another privacy breach where they used the username and password. So this is happening. Hackers are very clever. Once they get their hands on certain data, they try and reuse it. It's also important to enable multi-factor authentication when it's available. And we see that a lot with the bank apps, where you sign up for multi-factor authentication. You can either get a text where they give you a code after you've entered in your password. So these things are really important to help protect your personal information. And then I think it's important, if you have a lot of passwords, potentially think of a password manager. One thing though is you would have to make sure that it's secure and don't put in very important passwords like for your banking or your email, because it is always possible for the password manager to be breached as well. So I think with that, I'm going to turn it over to Brent to talk about the fun stuff, the online scams and scams.
Thank you. Fun's a relative term, by the way. So a couple of things. One, thank you for joining us. Two, thanks to Rose and Sean and all the Waterloo folks for having us here. Sean knows, because I tell him every time I'm here, this is my favorite Gowling's office. Don't tell the folks in Toronto. It's just a very different vibe here. So you're lucky to have these folks as your lawyers. Also, tell me if I am talking too slow, too fast, because I do that. I was in the Court of Appeal and I was running out of time, and the judge said to the judge, I'll just go faster. And he said, I don't see how that's possible. So I'll try to dial it down. So we've just now sort of covered, and the reason we start with understanding your rights is that it's part of protecting yourself and asserting yourself in a world where people are maybe not always looking out for your best interests. I can tell you, because Jasmine and I work on data breaches together. These are attacks on the organizations that have your data, not attacks on you, which we're going to get to in a minute. That you saw that list of all of your rights and all of the obligations on those companies, you would be shocked and appalled at how many of those companies are not following those principles. And the ones that I see them not following the most is getting rid of stuff that they don't need anymore. They hang on to people's data for decades. So, and how do we find out that they're doing that? When they get attacked and then you're breached. And let me just also say, we're going to get into some territory now where it's not stuff that it's uncomfortable to talk about, right? Because nobody likes acknowledging that they've been fooled or taken advantage of. But let me tell you, it can happen without you doing anything wrong or making any bad decisions. I myself am a member of 5 different class action lawsuits, meaning I'm one of the people that's in the lawsuit for data breaches, because companies that I trusted with my information have been breached. And as you can imagine, more paranoid than most people about this stuff. But I had a MasterCard. I took my parents to the Tenement Museum in Manhattan. I stayed at a Marriott. So there's 3 right there, because all those companies got hit. So we tell you about your rights here because you need to be concerned about what you share, because you shouldn't assume that your rights are being protected by those organizations. So we're going to move now to talk about, before we move on to the sort of next half of the presentation, which is thematically a little different, any questions on what you heard so far or any comments you want to share? Okay. So let's talk about the things that we do have to work on. What we're talking about here are attacks on individuals as opposed to attacks on companies, and they're coming for your money. Tax scams are a big part of this that we're seeing a lot of. And at the end of this, I'm going to, if there's time, take you to a website that I would like you all to bookmark, because it's a fabulous government resource for staying on top of all of the really creative ways that people are finding to separate you from your money. And I can't emphasize enough how much ingenuity goes into these things. If people applied half the ingenuity to jobs that they apply to scams, this would be a very different economy. So you have people planning as representatives of the CRA to trick you into sending money for fake debts or providing sensitive personal information that they can use to commit fraud. Has anyone here got a call from the CRA, usually a robocall, saying you're going to go to prison if you don't? Yeah, okay. Well, you're here, so I guess it worked out all right. CRA can't send you to prison. Never click on links from unfamiliar phone numbers. I get these all the time, and I don't know why. It's likely that some client that I have worked with who has my cell phone number has been compromised. So I got 3 of these texts yesterday, and once a week I get a call from my mom, sometimes 2 weeks, saying, I should just delete this, right? Yeah, you should just delete that. If you don't know the number, you don't know the person, just delete it and block those people as well. So here's some examples of some of the things we're seeing out in the wild. Your tax refund is available. Click here to receive your payment. Do not click there. You owe money to the CRA. Send your file to a collection agency. Contact us now. Don't. You will have a refund of $3,000 this year. Click here to initiate the claims process. As I know you know, and I deal with audiences that are less sophisticated than you, so they don't know this. This is not how CRA contacts you. Print's a bit small on this, and let me just say, the slides will be made available, so don't feel like you need to scribble down notes on this while we're going through it, and if it's a little hard to read, you'll get these so you can look at them up close. And at the end of these is contact information for Jasmine and I so that we can continue the conversation if you have questions arising from any of this. But you can see here some of what we're seeing out there. We've got text message scams containing personal information. We have scams around the Canada carbon rebate. We've got emergency or disaster benefit scams. These are the most awful and insidious ones, right? These are ones taking advantage of human suffering. We have cryptocurrency scams by phone. I dealt with, actually, was through this office, a client of the firm who is a very sophisticated businessman and was getting into crypto. And crypto is just confusing enough that he ended up falling for a scam that I frankly think I would have fallen for as well. Because when you're dealing with crypto, the hoops you have to jump through, at least up till very recently, just to participate, seem so arcane and so complicated that how would you know this is real, this is a scam? So those ones are a area of particular concern for me. Cryptocurrency scams by phone, GST and HST tax rebates, text messages to scam you to access your CRA accounts because they want that information. Text or instant messages offering refunds and fraudulent tax returns. And you've got a link here if you want to follow up on more of this good news with the CRA. I'm sure everyone's favorite website. So here's an example. This is a little bit hard to see, but this is the kind of stuff we're dealing with. Here's one of those texts in a sample. And this is classic cyber fraud behavior. You see here, this looks like it's just a regular R, but it's an actual R underlined character. So this looks like it's actual Royal Bank RBC's link, but it's not. It's taking you somewhere else. Another one less sophisticated that we see a lot is instead of a lowercase m, we see a lowercase r right next to a lowercase m. And my eyesight is now just bad enough that if I'm not careful, I could fall for that easily too. Who here has gotten a text from a bank that they don't actually bank with? Yeah. Yeah, there's only so many banks in Canada. They've got a pretty good shot if they send out enough of those of hitting somebody that will bank with that bank and actually fall for it. AI scams. Now, part of my practice is dealing with the cyber security aspects of artificial intelligence, and you've probably been hearing a lot about this recently. There's a lot of signal to noise. It's a little hard to sift through. But the thing to know is that AI is now good enough that with just a few words of your voice, and by that I mean, for instance, if AI hears your message on your cell phone, when somebody leaves you a message and you say, "I'm not here, call me back," 3 words of that, I'm told, is enough for the AI to get a good enough sample of your voice that it can impersonate you. So this is being weaponized on the scam front in all kinds of ways. The most terrifying one that I've seen, I think we'll get to this in a second, is people getting messages from people saying, "Grandma, I'm in jail. Can you please come and post this or that? You have to send this much money to blah, blah, blah." I'm seeing some nodding heads here. So yeah, this is an audience that's heard all this stuff. I'm glad to see that because I also do versions of this as a volunteer for the Bar Association and public libraries. And those folks haven't heard about any of this. So you're already ahead of the game here. But these are getting really good. And on the business side, this may be less of a concern for you, but if you do run a business and if you're in charge of that business, these are also being used to circumvent financial controls. Somebody gets an email saying from a scammer saying, "Hey, it's your boss, transfer this money." And the protocol for verifying instructions is you have to get a verbal instruction. Ta-da! You can get that with AI now as well. So you can fake a call from the boss verifying the instruction. And we've already seen this happen. Large amounts of money going out the door because this is being used to circumvent financial controls in a business setting. So there's an example of what we were talking about before with the calls to individuals. These are relatively nickel and dime small scams, but if you're a high net worth individual and the scammers have done the research on you to know that, you could be talking about much higher stakes. So here's the basic advice, and we've been giving this. You see here, 2016 at the bottom is the source. I leave this in here not because I'm lazy, not just because I'm lazy, but because the advice on this hasn't changed, right? These are still the basic measures that you need to take. Don't click on those unfamiliar links or attachments. Update your operating system. An amazing number of scams and viruses, all that stuff, can be blocked just by keeping your computers up to date, the operating system, your antivirus software, all that stuff. And when we see breaches in companies, I'll give you an example. I saw one 3 months ago where some of the servers for the companies, their operating system hadn't been updated in 10 years. Yes, exactly. They just, I guess, it's really nostalgic for old Microsoft, but they missed this. Use encryption, and go to an IT, like you can talk to the Geek Squad at Best Buy even for this. Like encryption is now very widely available for individuals. It's not terribly expensive. It's free in a lot of instances as well. So you want to think about encrypting your data on your computer, especially if you're someone that takes your laptop or your iPad with you when you travel. Back up your data on the cloud or external storage so that if your computer gets hacked or attacked, you have a way of restoring that data and you're not going to be held ransom by a scammer who will then say, give me the money or I won't help you unlock your computer. The earliest forms, incidentally, who here has heard of ransomware? And I'm sorry if that's a basic question, but I never really know. Okay, I'm seeing lots of nods, I'm seeing hands. Your hand's not up. You run a cybersecurity company. I know you know. All right, there's a hand. Got it. Lost my train of thought because I was harassing that nice man. Ransomware. Thank you. So the earliest ransomware attacks were actually basically just attacks on regular people, often on seniors, and they were very low value. Send us $100 in crypto, or we won't help you get your pictures of your grandkids back. And of course, that has now escalated to the multi-billion-dollar attacks we're seeing on companies now. But that's how it all started, was these small-scale attacks on just regular helpless people. Don't repeat your passwords. You know what the most common password is, even now, years after we started warning people about this?
Passwords.
Password, or 123 password, or password 123. Well, now you have my banking password, so be gentle. Pet names, kid names, all these things. What I do, for what it's worth, when I have to set up a password, I close my eyes and I just sort of at the keyboard, see what comes out. Okay, now I'll add a couple of symbols. Boom, bang, new password. So it is completely random, especially if you're as sloppy a typist as I am. But password generators are good for this too, because they're running on an algorithm that no one else is going to be able to guess at. So something else to think about. I should say also, and I'm looking to my friend to confirm this, who runs a company in this. Passwords are soon going to be a thing of the past, right? We're moving past passwords into a world where you're going to be doing more of the multi-factor authentication. You're probably seeing this already, right? Some websites that you visit, you have to put in a code from your cell phone. Exactly. That's going to become the norm because we're realizing that no password is really good enough. Cover your webcam with tape. This is one where I different people think this is where I put on my tinfoil hat, and I hear different things from different cybersecurity people about whether this is actually necessary. But for what it's worth, that's a new Lenovo laptop, and it has a built-in screen cam cover. So I still do it because a really good virus will turn on your camera without turning the light on to tell you your camera's on. So you have no idea what you're transmitting or if you're transmitting. And the last bit here, stay informed about the latest online scams. This isn't a hobby anyone wants to take on as a hobby. I get that, except me. But it's really worth your while to keep on top of this stuff. If for no other reason than because you'll be the smartest person in your friend group when you're talking about this stuff. You can break out this at cocktail parties. But I really do recommend, I mean, this is sort of the new street smart, right? Staying on top of what these things look like so that you see it, you know about it before it hits the news. Watch out for fake websites asking for your info. And again, we talked about this before with the URL looking very authentic. One of the things, they'll be spelling or grammar mistakes. And incidentally, we see this less and less, but when we're dealing with email scams, you'll see, well, there's a sloppy typo. This scammer obviously isn't very good at this. Some of those typos and grammar mistakes are put in there on purpose. I see some heads nodding, so you know about this, because as the way that it works, every time you update your antivirus software, your McAfee or your Norton or whatever else, it's up to date on the latest sort of scam messaging. So to make it harder for the software to recognize that, they'll put in deliberate mistakes so that the message isn't following patterns that the computer software has already seen. So some of those mistakes are there on purpose, and they'll just hope that you don't notice. Who here's on Facebook? I'm not going to hack you, I promise. I am, for what it's worth. Okay. Do you notice that you get a lot of ads for like online retail sites that, oh, it looks pretty good, but I've never heard of this site? And then you're like, oh, okay, whatever. And then a day later, you see the same merchandise, but it's a different company, like with it also with a slick website you've never heard of. They seem to all just be popping up out of nowhere. So one of the things you want to do is jump online and figure out, and you can do this through this website. It's free, godaddy.com, who is, and you can figure out who owns this domain and how long has it been around. Because if it's a brand new one that's just popped up, it's at least a chance it's a scam. So when you're talking about who am I going to trust online shopping from, sort of established brands that have a longer history are a better bet. And you can see whether or not that's real. If they've been around for years, when you check this, that's a good sign. Incidentally, and I don't think this is in the slides, and I don't have it in front of me, but if you reach out to me, I can provide this to you. There's a website called Have I Been Pawned? And pawn doesn't have the letter A in it. It's weird internet speak. Don't ask me to explain why. But what it lets you do is put together by white hat hackers, and those are good guys who they put together lists of dumps from different attacks. So all the data that gets dumped on the dark web, whatever, and you can go in there and see if your email address is part of those dumps of data that are on the dark web. So you can find out if your email's been compromised. You'd be amazed how many of our emails are in there. And often I'll deal with a data breach, and let's say a company's employee says, well, I've been getting these scams. Obviously, I've been injured because of this breach. I've been compromised, and I'll put their email address into that website, and I will find 10 different data breaches that they're already part of without knowing it. So now if you're the company, that's good news, because it means that employee can't say definitively this is because of the breach to your website or your company. But it also gives you a sense of just how easy it is to be compromised and how frequently we are. You want to really err on the side of caution. Suspicion is a really good instinct in this, and I suspect you're probably already there. But if you're not, developing that sort of suspicion is a good instinct to acquire. If something feels off about a website, don't give them personal information. Don't give them financial information. Don't use them. Watch out for phishing emails, and these are some of the things you want to keep an eye out for in phishing emails. Ones where you got a different URL in the message than you do in the one that's actually in the URL bar at the top. Misleading domain names or a funny code. Message contains poor spelling and grammar. This is the same one I just looked at. No, it's not. Similar. Well, it bears repeating. What can you say? Spelling and grammar. Message is asking for personal information, and you can't figure out why would they need that. If an offer seems too good to be true, probably is. If it comes out of the blue, so this isn't in response to something you've initiated, that should get your spidey sense tingling. If you're asked to send money or cover expenses, and if the message makes unrealistic threats, you've probably experienced this, but maybe you're too sophisticated to have this, to experience this, but have you ever got one of these messages where it sort of gave you that feeling in the pit of your stomach? Because it's like, you got to do this right away, or we're going to close down your bank account, or we're going to do this or that, or we're going to report you to. Some of them are obviously fake, but some of them, it takes you a second to realize, okay, you know what, probably fake. But you have that feeling in your gut. It's like, oh geez, I've got to deal with this quickly. That's what they're designed to do. They're designed to make you react out of fear quickly before you dig down on it, before you do the research, before you ask around, before you make a phone call to see whether or not the message actually came from your bank, which, by the way, is always a good way to go with these things if you want to invest the time. If it looks like they say it's coming from your bank, call up the bank. Usually they'll say, that's not how we will ever contact you. So if you're feeling pressure, resist that and know that that's that's part of the psychology of the scam. So what do we do? Report this, report it to the police. They're getting pretty good at this. We're starting to see a lot more arrests and actual action coming from people reporting to the police and the Canadian Anti-Fraud Center. and so I'm glad you have the link there. That's the website I want to take you to, but that's the one I encourage you when you've got some time to take a look at. And you'll see in there, they've actually got scams listed A to Z, and there's a lot of them. And then they'll have this sort of, here are the latest scams. So when we started seeing romance scams aimed at seniors, right? Those were up on those websites before I was even seeing them in the media. So they really are on top of this because they're getting the latest every time somebody reports. They're getting that information, and they're tied in with the RCMP and other actors in the space. So if you report it and you report it to the Anti-Fraud Center, you're making everybody safer because you're contributing to the base of knowledge we all rely on to not get caught by these things. And there's no downside to doing this, by the way, right? I know it's not a good feeling to tell anybody that you've been scammed, but you're really doing a civic duty by doing it. I know that sounds corny, but I really do believe this. You obviously want to inform banks and credit card companies, get new cards, do it right away. And if it's possible to change the numbers on things, some of them you can't. You can't change your social insurance number except in extraordinarily rare circumstances. And having your SIN card stolen isn't one of them. So even if you're being victimized by a scam because somebody has your social insurance number, they won't change it. But if it's a private company thing, there's a good chance you can get that number changed, and you should. And obviously report any missing identity documents. If you lose a driver's license, a health card, any of those things, report that too. Identity. There's a whole economy based on identity theft here and all over the world. I've been talking, and I suspect talking too fast. I'm going to take a breath for a second and ask if there are any questions so far.
Let's talk about home devices. I like your Google Alexa.
It's best to stay out of your house. Yeah, no, those are you're
Are they
absolutely.
always listening?
Many of them are always listening, and some of them are part of botnets that have been hijacked by cyber criminals. Who here knows the term Internet of Things? Probably the dumbest term we've come up with in the tech space. I don't know, because it's like the Internet of Stuff. But Internet of Things basically means connected devices that aren't an actual computer, but are connected by internet to actual computers. So if you're one of these people that has a toaster that talks to your phone to tell you when your toast is done or your coffee is ready, all of those devices with small, cheap consumer things where the latest gimmick, instead of adding another clock on it, is to make it connected to the internet and to your phone. I have Christmas lights like this. There's almost no cybersecurity attached to any of them. There were obligations to build it in, and they didn't. And of course, some people hang on to those things for years, right? And they don't get updated. So that's a concern. And those are the dumb, smaller devices I'm talking about. Your connected fridge and so forth. For what it's worth, and I don't have my tinfoil hat on right now, I try not to have those in the house. But you mentioned one of the more sophisticated ones. You're talking about Alexa, talking about Siri. And yeah, unless you change your unless you've got those things set up right, they are listening all the time. A few years ago, I think was it Samsung with the smart TVs? They actually, because it was a smart TV, so you're not a good, I'm remembering the right manufacturer. You could give a verbal instruction to your television, and they sold them with a warning not to have personal conversations in front of your television. Does anyone here not fight with their spouse in the room where the TV is? Talk about your day in the room where the TV is. Mention a client when you're complaining about your day in the room where the TV is. Yeah, exactly. So these are my favorite. One of these was one where a particular string of sounds sounded to, I think it was Alexa actually, like an instruction to record whatever was being said. And then when the conversation ended or after an amount of time, to send that recording to somebody. I can't imagine what string of syllables would make a computer think that's what you were telling it to do, but this is the thing. And that's just that's not a virus, that's not a scam, that's just the programming. So yeah, I don't use those things. I don't talk to Siri. I don't have any of those sort of smart listening devices in my house. But everyone else does. So that is a thing you need to worry about because sometimes you're in someone else's house. Long-winded answer to a simple question, but it's a very good question. You, sir.
Is there such a thing as paying safely online using your credit card?
Is it just for the folks at home that didn't hear the question? Is there such a thing as paying safely online using a credit card? Eh, we're talking about varying degrees of risk, right? What I would say the one, if I say no, what I mean by that at the one end is it's always possible that the company, the organization that you've transacted with online will be hacked. So the examples I gave at the beginning, the MasterCard, obviously they had my credit card. The Tenement Museum in Manhattan, I paid for the ticket. I booked the tickets with a credit card. The Marriott, I stayed at a hotel on business and I paid for it with my credit card. So there's at least the potential that in all those breaches, that information gets scooped up in the data breach on the organization. The other one, the Tenement Museum, I mentioned, actually it's more complicated than that. And this is just to give you a sense of how deep this rabbit hole goes. It wasn't a cyber attack on the Tenement Museum. It was a cyber attack on the software suite that is used by charities and charitable organizations, like, for instance, museums. And it sort of does their back end for collecting funds and for doing, interacting with their sponsors and their patrons. So it wasn't even the company I transacted with. It was the company that works with the company that I transacted with to help them go carry out their transactions. So that's how many steps removed the risk can even be. And it's always there. Now, in terms of just, should I be worried about the site that I'm interacting with directly? Is this just a scam? And they're going to run off with my credit card money, my credit card number, and buy a bunch of things? That's a thing I worry about less, but that's because I'm very selective about what I will pay for online using my credit card. So companies that I have been around for a long time, where I know that if I want to go after them, I can find them, for instance. So that's a narrow range for me. You have a follow up?
Some websites allow you to pay through, say, PayPal.
Yeah.
Is that any safer? Say PayPal would have your information.
So the question is, how about if they're using a third-party payment solution like PayPal? If it's one I've heard of, if it's actually PayPal, I'm more comfortable with that than a lot of the other options. And so especially if I'm dealing with a small company, let's say I'm buying tickets to a concert or a small concert venue. I did this recently. Their payment solution is PayPal. And I'm comfortable enough with PayPal. Is it possible they'll be hacked? Sure. But I'll know where to go to sue them. And apologies if they're on the Zoom. So yeah, but what I would say is you're better off with one you've heard of, sure.
In other words, cash doesn't work.
Well, cash works, but the opportunity to use it is getting a lot narrower, isn't it? Yeah. And frankly, I almost never carry it, so I'm part of the problem. But yeah, no, it's, and this is why you should buy crypto. I'm kidding about that. In the back?
Yeah, Brent, a lot like you, I get a weekly call from my mother saying, is this a scam? Should I delete this? And speaking of PayPal, one thing that she fell for that I didn't see you cover was she bought something through PayPal, decided she didn't want it, needed to contact PayPal, cancel it, Googled PayPal help desk, clicked the first link and started talking and knowing that first link is a sponsored link and is not always actually PayPal was what got her in trouble. She trusted it immediately because she was making the outreach.
So the comment was, the person is transacting with a real legitimate payment solution and then wants to do an exchange or return or something and ends up going to try to do that, but clicking on a spoof website, we call them spoof, that looks a lot like it, but it's actually somebody else. And now you're dealing with a scammer. That happens a lot. And actually we saw a variation on this years ago with eBay, where you go on eBay, you try to buy something, and it's like you've been outbid, it's gone, and then you get contacted by a site that looks like eBay but is not eBay, and are quite happy to take your credit card information, because it's a scam. But it's sure like the logo looked the same, and this is one of these things where they rely on you being in a hurry and sort of being on autopilot. So yeah, absolutely. You can get yourself in trouble because you're trusting a brand and you think you're dealing with that brand, but it's a spoof of the brand. So yeah, yet another variation on this. You're absolutely right. Any other questions before I move on? Yes, sir.
The scenario of paying online by credit card or going the old way, is the option of calling the actual phone number and getting a person there and giving your credit card details by phone, including your serial number. Is that safer?
So the question is, am I safer paying for credit card by phoning the company and giving the credit card details over the phone? Possibly, because it seems, intuitively, it seems less likely to me that they are so well staffed that they've got a lot of people sitting in an office waiting for me to call to give them my credit card number so that they can scam me. That's harder to automate than just one where you're putting it into a website for sure. But the problem, I think, is this, that's one of those solutions like using cash where it can get pretty clunky. So this is somewhere you can end up spending a lot of your time trying to do it this way. So yeah, I would feel better about that. But, you know, there's still the possibility that you are talking to some fraudulent call center, somebody where they do have a bunch of people there to answer the phones.
I just have a recommendation for this. What I recommend people do is get another credit card with a low limit that they just use online. And so if there is a breach with that card, it can only go up to whatever, you know, like $2,000, and that way, and just use that card online is one way to kind of protect yourself.
Yeah, and with apologies to our friends from the bank, one other way around that as well is to resist, if you're going to have a credit card that you're using for online transactions, if the credit, like often the bank wants to raise your credit limit, right? Because there's money on the interest. You may want to think twice about whether you let them do that, or at least how high. It's like gambling, right? How much am I prepared to lose on a given transaction? And you know, are the cocktails any good? So it's a one way of mitigating the risk for sure. Anything else in the room before yes?
So what about in a situation where you buy something online and you have to authenticate that purchase, where they send you a text with a number to authenticate that purchase? Can you see any scamming happen in a situation like that?
So a situation where you need to do there's authentication to complete a purchase, and they send you a text that you click on to complete the purchase. Again, I think for me, it comes down to whether or not I trust the site that I'm transacting with in the first place. So if it's one that I know is a real one that I have a history with and I know has been around, yeah, I think I'm probably fine with that, because it would be awfully random for some other scammer to send me a text that looks like it's connected to that right after that, especially if the website is saying this is what's going to happen next. But again, all of this comes down to the source of, you know, you're starting with the website that you're going to interact with. Do you trust that website? I think.
So in this particular scenario, this person did not actually transact the purchase and didn't see that a PIN number had come through. But the Visa, it did go through the Visa, and the PIN had been clicked on. So I'm not sure, have you heard of anything like that?
Not exactly, and I'm not entirely certain that I understand it, but I'm happy to follow up with you offline on that, because I think I would want to ask some follow-up questions to understand exactly what happened there. But on the subject of text just generally, and messages just generally, I dealt with a $300 million crypto theft, and here's the way the crypto theft happened. The hackers got into, so they, like when you transact in crypto, you're on a crypto platform, because they don't, like most banks for the moment are not that involved in this. So you're dealing with the crypto platform that sells and buys crypto directly. You set up an account on the site and so forth. So what happened was, and people that are in this world, sometimes they do a lot of transactions in a day, right? They're like they're like sort of amateur traders at home. So they're getting a lot of messages saying, authorize this transaction, authorize this transaction. These guys broke into the back end software service provider for the crypto platform, sent out messages to thousands and thousands of people on the platform and said, authorize this transaction, please. Well, the transaction was send your money to me. And because people were so trained to click on the thing when you get the thing, they sent $300 million to Russia. I think this is one of these situations where, well, I actually didn't get to Russia, because this is one of these situations where the dog catches the car by accident. They managed to dupe so many people for so much money that they were afraid to move it. So the last I heard, it's still sitting in a spinner on a wallet. Spinner's a way of laundering your money on the blockchain, because they were afraid to move it, because once you start moving it, it's traceable, and then you might end up at the wrong end of a CIA drone or the FBI when we were still collaborating with Russia. knocking down your door, because the wallets now, they're getting better at figuring out who owns what wallets on the blockchain. So any sort of, if you feel like you're getting into a routine where you're being trained to just say yes to stuff, think hard about whether you're going to say yes to stuff. Any other hands, or should I move on? This is good stuff. Yeah.
Do phones listen to your conversations? Like I had this scenario where someone I was talking with was talking about getting braces. And suddenly the next day they have ads everywhere for dental offices. How exactly does it work?
So the way that it works, depending on your settings, is that the phones can be passively picking up what you say. Now, here's the distinction here, which may or may not make a difference to you. The information is being fed into AI, which is processing it and then sending you targeted ads. Now, the AI doesn't know who you are as a human being. It doesn't know who your family is or any of those things. You're a data point from which you receive some input, and the AI then decides this data point might like this other data point. So there isn't a human processing that information and storing it. Nobody has a dossier on you, but the AI is collecting and responding to what it hears. If that bothers you, you should turn that off. If you think it's worth the trade because you're getting targeted advertising that's more useful to you than the stuff you otherwise get. My wife sent me a meme that I love where it's this wall of toilet seats. And it says, Amazon, because you order a toilet seat on this Amazon. We heard you like toilet seats. Here's a bunch more toilet seats, right? You can get a lot of dumb stuff you don't care about. But when the stuff works well, you get ads for things you actually might like. So you have to weigh that. Are we running out of time?
I think we're open for more questions if people.
If one gets a phone call on your cell or whatever phone, and the number doesn't show through, or number is on you don't know, and you think it may be a scam, is it safe to say hi or hello? You say they can steal your voice, or just put it off?
So the question is, let's say you get a call from a blocked number or a number you don't recognize. Is it a good idea to answer the call and then speak? Or should we be worried that what you are doing is providing it a sound file of your voice that can then be used later for cloning and essentially to do an audio deepfake of your voice? The short answer is you're absolutely right. That is a concern. So I wouldn't. If you don't recognize the number, don't pick up the call. And sometimes you're still going to get tricked, right? And hopefully it's just one of these scams where they're trying to get you on the phone to talk to you because they're going to try to sell you something. And after that, once you realize that, oh, you got to me, block the number and report it. And you can do that usually with one click, at least on an iPhone. Yeah.
Well, maybe I'm a dinosaur, but I just found out this just happened to me twice in the last 2 days. I was calling clients and it said, this person is, what did it say? This person is blocking not blocking their calls, is monitoring their calls or something. So press 9 if whatever, or, leave a message. And then they called me back. So but it happened twice in the last 2 days. So I've never had that happen to me.
I haven't seen that either, and I don't know what system that is.
So
I should say though, I try not to answer my phone. When my phone goes off, I'm like, who just phoned somebody? How rude is that? Send me an email first to warn me that my phone's gonna ring. Have some decency.
yeah, so there are some companies out that are helping individuals protect their privacy. And what they're doing is if that's not a phone number in their address book, or if it's blocked, they have AI kind of sort through it. So you would leave a message and then the AI would tell the person, yes, this is a real person, call them back.
Part of why I like doing these is that I learn things often from my colleagues. Yes.
Every time I use my credit card after making a purchase, within maybe an hour or so, it's every time. It's not once in a while, it's every time. I use it within half an hour, I come home, then my phone will ring and say, this is Amazon, your card has been used to make a purchase for such and such, exactly the same amount that I think there. And then it tells me, of course, press 1 if it's that you did make that purchase. Press 2 if you did not make that one. And me, because I've received so many of these. Practically every other day, somebody always call me, tell me to press 1 or 2, press 1 or 2. I never, And the thing is, you're talking about, monitoring the phone number who calls you. But I'm one of those old people who do not believe in having, seeing who is phoning me. So I only use landlines. I don't use like you people using cell phone. I use landlines, and my landline is unlisted and has nothing to indicate what number it's calling. So therefore, when the call comes in, I automatically have to answer it because I don't know. It could have been my daughter, my children, or things like that. Okay, so have you heard of this kind of thing? I mean, how do Amazon knows every time I make I give you an example. Yesterday I went out and went to Best Buy, and I bought one of those bulk storage things for computers. Was $105 in all total. I get back home. 2 hours later, I get a call. This is Amazon. Your card has been used to make a purchase for $105. If you have made the right purchase, press 1. If not, press 2.
So the question is, the gentleman here is, every time he does a transaction with his credit card, he then gets a phone call from someone purporting to be Amazon, quoting back the dollar value of the transaction and asking him to authenticate it. I haven't heard of that specific one before. The one I have heard of is people getting messages purportedly from Amazon saying your account has been used to purchase a new iPhone, blah, 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 blah. Would you like to continue with that purchase? So what you don't want to do is respond to that in any way, because you're either authorizing a transaction or you're providing them with more data about yourself. That sounds like something to do with your credit card, maybe a setting on your credit card account. But
I don't. No. It's a regular Mastercard.
it's a regular MasterCard.
The Scotia Bank Momentum Mastercard.
Maybe if you could just take out your card and read it to the number to us and your PIN.
Thanks for the free advertising. That sounds like an amazing card. Or maybe it's just a way that to make Jeff Bezos richer.
In the old days, I used to have pocket card from everybody, and I realized that I was no longer managing my expenditure and my income, so I discontinued all of them except keeping the Scotiabank Momentum, because then I can do payment online, things like that, instead of me having to go here and there. Because I only believe in two things: either an online things that I can trust, a thing, or cash. Like you say, that cash thing there, that is coming. And do you know who's responsible for that thing there? You are no longer able. You try to go to buy something, let's say $5,000, and you bring $5,000. The first thing the people look at you is this: where do you get that $5,000? You have stolen it somewhere, because people don't carry $5,000 with them anymore. And you know who is responsible for all these kind of things? It's the government. The government is trying to monitor how much money you have. When you fill in your income tax, you go through somebody that you are declaring.
I think they're about to break into the door here. Coming.
That's what people don't hear. As it is happening, for example, in China, not even 1 yen. You can't even buy something for 1 yen, which is 25 cents or whatever it is, with cash, because they look at you right away. You must have stolen that 1 yen from somewhere, because everybody there is given a cell phone like that. You have that thing that tell you to scan. You just scan.
We are, I think, so it looks like I'm not going to be able to sell you any swampland in Florida because you're on top of this stuff. But yeah, it does sort of feel like we're moving into a phase where paying for things with cash raises suspicions, which is.
I'll give you an example. I had a windfall. I think I won about $6,000 out of one of those, 649 or whatever it is. I took it to the bank. You know how long it took for that money to go into my account? Oh, it took about an hour, because
That was the
money.
bank, though, right?
Well, yeah, I mean, part of what we're seeing as well, Lisa, I have an example that's not exactly that example, but I went to go pay for something with my debit card and the bank had frozen it. And I went in to find out why. I won't say which bank, but it's not yours. And they said, well, there is we can't really, well, it was flagged by the system. The system turns out to be AI that's assisting them in their sort of, anti-fraud detecting, blah, blah, blah. But
Yeah, it's personally.
yeah, but let me tell you the rest of the story. I was annoyed by this, and because this is my job, I asked follow-up questions, and nobody at the bank branch could tell me anything. So I dug down and dug down and dug down, and it turned out the suspicious transaction was that the debit card I was trying to pay for something with had been used to purchase several hundred, well, let's say $200 worth of something at a nearby store, the grocery store around the block from the bank branch. Like, that's suspicious. That's what's getting flagged. So I think some of what we're seeing is use of technology to sort of aid, things you want done, right? They want to be looking for suspicious activity, suspicious transactions, but I think there's some overcorrecting. So we're all going to be dealing with some of these annoying privations, I think, in the future. I took the microphone away from you. Do you want to?
No, I was just going to ask if there's any more questions. If not,
What time is it?
It's 1:15.
I think we're pretty good then. So if there's,
We started at 12:15, so you've got a little bit of, if you.
so if there's any more questions, jump in now. Otherwise, I'd like to thank Jasmine and Brent for helping us out here today and speaking. And with the beautiful weather, I'm pretty sure I'm going to be getting some notifications about some golf club specials at Golf Town or something like that. There's right back there.
Chance in getting a copy of those slides?
Yeah, 100%.
They'll be emailed to you, yes.
Thank you.
Yeah, copy.
You'll have our contact information, so if you've got follow-up questions or other stories you want to share, because I'm always interested to hear this stuff, feel free to reach out.
And it looks like we probably got some more treats back at the back of the room there. So we can sort of head back there and grab a coffee or some more treats. And again, thanks very much, Rose and Gowlings, and for hosting us here today.
Thanks.